we think that, we think that this essay is either about showing how Krugman persuades his readers, or talking, or drawing a comparison between Obama and FDR, right? And Leigh is having that debate with herself, too, right? Because on the one hand, in her earlier draft, Leigh says, Krugman frames his essay on a comparison, right? So now Leigh's talking about what Krugman is doing, right? The means that he's using. Then, in her next draft, Leigh does this. Krugman persuades his readers through direct comparisons. So let's just take this out, right? Krugman persuades his readers, right? So we're still talking about what Krugman is doing, right? Drawing comparisons. But now we're talking about why he's doing it, right? So we're adding a bit of a purpose to what we're talking about. And so that adds a level of complexity. But I think that it could be taken, one step farther, right? Krugman persuades his readers, so that's sort of a goal being articulated, right? But Krugman persuades his readers to what? Because if we can say what Krugman is persuading his readers to do, then it's not just that Krugman's essay tries to make people think what Krugman is doing. We can actually fold in what the ultimate purpose is, right? So, what would we add there?
View the economic crisis in terms of the Great Depression.
Yeah, I think that does it. Because I think that's what this paragraph does, right? Krugman is persuading his readers, right? So now we see where he's looking in order to do what he's doing. And now we see precisely what he's doing. Like who he's doing it to, what he's doing. Great. Yeah, and I think that small change takes the topic sentence to more or less exactly where it needs to be. There could be some tweaking that's done later on in the sentence, and I want to go there now. But look at how we've gone from Krugman frames, the 1930 2010 in terms of the 1930s, right? To Krugman persuades. So it's not just that Krugman's doing it. Krugman's framing it for a specific purpose, right? And now we can say exactly what that purpose is, right? So those three levels each make the paragraph better, and they make it better in a pretty direct line towards towards a single purpose, right? Revision doesn't always work out so linearly, so that was nice that you were taking that step in that way. And left a little bit for us to add. So when we say through, though, right, that word doesn't really do anything. There are ways in which through can be used in order to mean by means of, right? It's just a way of saying via. But if we said instead by, then then all of a sudden this sentence doesn't work anymore, right? Great Depression by direct comparisons between, right? When you say through, what it makes you do is put a noun phrase on the other side, right? He makes you do X because X through Y, right? We can restate this as a verb, right? By comparing directly the financial conditions of the 1930s to those of 2010, right? So now all of a sudden, direct comparisons aren't something that are just in Krugman's essay, right? Instead, Krugman is directly comparing, right? So because we're talking about how he's doing it, now we're talking about them in terms of verbs, right? So you're making it more active and more real. I know, we're running a little bit short on time. If you've got to go, but I'm going to take another 3 or 4 minutes here. All right. And this is exactly what Leigh does next, right? By switching, right? So by doing X, he achieves Y. So let's highlight that for a second. By switching time frames, Krugman presents President Obama's actions as replications of President Roosevelt's, right? And then Leigh does something that we saw in John's the other day, and that a lot of people do, right? He says, and then proceeds to, right? So those are two different statements. One says that Krugman could only present Obama's actions in this way by switching time frames, right? And the other one says that Krugman does this one thing and then he does the other thing. So in other words, the first is a causal relationship, right? Because it's a strategy, and the second is simply a description of a temporal ordering, right? And that's why we're going to get to the West Wing, because in the episode where they're sitting in the room and President Bartlett makes a joke about Texas and big hats, and they say, "Oh, and you lost the election because of that." He goes, "I didn't lose the election because of making a joke about big hats. I lost the election because I'm an intellectual," right? So the whole idea there is you want to find what the fundamental cause is, and once you find the cause, as opposed to just the order that things happen in, you have much greater explanatory power, right? Because this right here, this first half of the sentence, is a strong claim, right? By moving back and forth between the two time frames, Krugman can make the two situations exactly the same, right? Then you could spend the rest of the paragraph talking about in what ways they're the same, right? And it happens later too. We have, since they were wrong about deficit spending in the 1930s, then they are wrong now as well. So this is Krugman's argument, right? By saying this first bit, right? By doing this first bit where he causally links the two, right? Down here, he can then add a bit of predictive power to it, right? Because they were wrong in the past, they're wrong now. Because spending worked in the past, it will work now, right? So once you talk about this frame in terms of sort of a causal link that you're drawing, in terms of the analysis of his style, then you can break the paragraph down into two different streams. Where on the one hand, you talk about how the mistakes of the past will be the mistakes of the present, right? And how spending worked, and so it will work again, right? And play those two off of one another. And that's why this isn't the right concluding sentence. Because this concluding sentence simply steps back and repeats again that Krugman is putting 2 points of view out there, right? But that's not what your paragraph is about. Your paragraph is that he determines how we see things by presenting a certain frame. Yeah. Okay, that's all. That'll be up on the website. Sorry we ran out of time there.